thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for welcoming up to the program.
All right, so this is quite interesting. I mean, urban migration has been with us since before the 60s and something that we've seen over time. Why this project now, and what does it speak to?
So the project came now because it's a very timely. And the reason why it's timely is because we have noticed that in the early 50s, maybe we had about 10-30% of people who were living in the urban areas. And nowadays, basically the influx from the urban area to the cities has made our population growth into the urban areas to be around 50%. And this basically is coming with a lot of challenges because it will change the way we look at cities, it will change the way we organize ourselves, it will impact on our policies. And then if we don't start to rethink on those urban-rural linkages, we may have some challenges in, let's say, providing services, feeding our people and connecting.
Well, this has already happened though, isn't it? I mean, we've seen the deterioration of infrastructure. And in fact, I think that your boss at NEPAD once called it the ruralification of the urban centers as a result of that.
Correct. So he was talking basically about the ruralification of the urban centers. But one of the challenges that we have now is that between the rural and the metropolitan areas, you have also like an emerging cities that are connecting the two.
Right.
And then if you look at just, for example, the food industry in West Africa, we're talking about 700, like more than 120 or 170 billion dollars a year in basically in value. But if you look at where the production is coming from, 93% almost is coming from the rural areas.
Right.
So we're importing only 7%. Now the challenge is when you don't connect basically, you don't create basically a long value chain, you don't train people along those value chain, you don't provide services that basically connect the rural to urban areas, you run through those challenges. So now we have to basically go from policies that design to address basically cities to policies that are co-designed with local communities, where you decentralize, you create infrastructure, you create basically the need at the rural area so that you can basically connect the two.
So what are you hoping to do with this project?
So what we're hoping to do now is to basically go through new repositioning of our intervention in terms of like supporting the continent. And this go along many areas. Let's say, for example, we just pick up the policy area. So if you look at agriculture and you want to address the issue of agriculture now, you have to go beyond agriculture. You have to look at basically the policy within the context of multi-sectoral issues, where you're looking at the trade issue, you're looking at the infrastructure, you're looking at the health, and you're looking at how all is connected. So instead of having like a monosectoral view of how we basically conduct business, now you have to put it within a multi-sectoral
And these
area.
are Pan-African norms that you want to set up so that everyone on the continent starts to think in the same way about the urban city setup.
Correct. So the challenge we have at the moment is like if you go from a country to different countries, the definition of the city are different.
Right.
The definition of agglomeration are different. The definition of basically metropolitan areas are different. So we have to be able to basically come to with a process where basically we can compare them. And then we have to connect the cities and then also push for regional integration so that whatever we do at the city level or when we connect urban to rural areas, we can upscale them from the regional point of view so that also we can give opportunity to people living in the area, the rural areas.
And you know, sadly, a lot of these ideas have come over the years. And in the end, actually, it's the politicians that really need to enable them. Are they on board, and what will be different this time when you try and push through this agenda?
I think what is different now, at least from our point of view at the continental level, is that the African Union has engaged a lot of reforms. And through those reforms, for example, the NEPAD, that used to be the NEPAD agency, has been transformed into the African Union Development Agency. And this comes like basically with an increased mandate in terms of supporting countries to mobilize resources, helping countries to develop new ideas, providing countries with advisory services, and then basically pushing for the implementation of the vision of the continent, which is Agenda 2063. So that agenda was adopted by the head of state, and basically is a document that all countries are using now to drive basically their transformation process. And through that transformation process, the issue of urban-rural connectivity is at the center. So if you look at now, if you look at the SDGs, we're talking about basically how to capacitate basically the rural communities. The African Union has put in place in 2014 a committee that basically is tasked only to push the agenda on how to link basically the rural and the urban cities, and also look at what is happening at the rural level, because usually the rural communities are the ones that are left behind. But in terms of policy, we should be able to decentralize and push basically some responsibility to the rural community and help them basically to drive the development and the transformation agenda of the continent.
All right, Mr. Diop, sadly we've run out of time, but I think it's a conversation that we need to be having more frequently, just to get a sense of how we are moving forwards as a continent. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was Mr. Dr. Hamady Diop from NEPAD sharing his thoughts with us about this interesting development by NEPAD, African Reality Cities Project, of course, speaking to this urban, rural, peri-urban dilemma that we're facing on the continent. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll have your headlines as we start the last hour of SA Today, as we start telling your story. So